Whakarongo, whakarongo. Whakarongo ki te tangia te mā tui, 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 tui a. Hui, 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 hui a. Tui ai runga, tui ai raro, tui ai waho, tui ai roto. Tui ai te here tangata karongo te pō, karongo te ao. Tui ai te moko tangata I takia mai nei, I Hawaii ki nui, I Hawaii ki roa. I Hawaii ki pāma mao, ki te honu I wairua, ki te whaiao, ki te ao marama uhi. Wero, tau mai te Maori, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Nā ko nāno tēnā tātou e te whānau. Nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai, kia ora. Kia ora ana, whakalowhalahi atu, welcome friends, nisabola, malulelei, aloha, I ora ana, tēnā koutou, nau mai, haere mai, piki mai, kake mai rā. Kia ora te whānau. I'd like to welcome you all here to this webinar. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for all your time that you've streamed in to be a part of this wonderful kōrero. Ko wai au, hua mai, ko hau te kaikawe kōrero mo tēnei kouwhau. I am the chair for this webinar. Taku pāpā no Ngāpuhi, taku māma no Waikato, taku karani pāpā no Haina. My father hails from the northern tribes of Ngāpuhi, my mother south of Bombay, Ngāti Mahuta, the southern tribes of the Waikato, and my grandfather came from China, so he's Chinese. My mother's half Chinese, which makes me quarter Chinese, and of course my tama ayo Chinese as well. So I'm Maori, Pākehā, Chinese, and warm Pacific greetings to everybody who have tuned in. You are in the right place, which is this kōwhau, or this discussion, this wānanga, this robust discussion. Before Te Tiriti, there was Moana, Pacific perspectives on Te Tiriti and Pacific peoples in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Before I introduce our speakers, who are Sione, Tui'tahi, and Viliami Puloka, I'm just going to run through some housekeeping details of how the session is going to be run. So our Sione is going to lead a presentation which will go on for about 30 minutes. Viliami will comment on that in conclusion of that presentation, and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A, for some question and answers. And thank you also to Jenny Renkine for being our moderator for this session as well. At this juncture, I'd also like to thank Dan Mills, who was also operating in the background, ensuring that we're all being connected this afternoon. There's also a checkbox, as you can see on your right-hand side. Feel free to communicate with everybody that's making comments. If there are any questions, the hope is that Jenny will also capture some of those questions and put them into the Q&A session. Hoi no rā e te whānau. Without any further ado, it is certainly my pleasure and a treat to present our presenters this afternoon. E kōrua, I aku matua, I aku rangatira ngā mihi nui ki a kōrua, kia whai wā, kia whāriki hia o koutou o kōrua kōrero, no reira tēnā kōrua, Sione Tui'tahi, kōrua tahi ko Viliami Puloka, ngā mihi nui ki a kōrua.
Ngā mihi atu hoki kia koe Valance. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Malo Lale, warm Pacific greetings along with our chair today. It's a blessing and an honor to be part of this talanoa, these conversations about Te Tiriti and Moana Nui a Kiwa. Then our technical whiz might have a few words from him in the form of a slide, Valance, as I understand. I just want to double check that before I continue on.
Nothing from me. You're good to go.
So thank you, Dan and Viliami. Yeah, I'll introduce myself as you have proposed, Dan, and then I will ask Viliami to introduce himself before I go into the actual presentation. Again, warm greetings, everyone, wherever you are in the four winds, any part of the world. This is now a global village, First and foremost, I acknowledge the Almighty. And secondly, I would like to acknowledge the huge human calamity that we are experiencing around the world. And of course, our motto, Aotearoa New Zealand. Our thoughts are with those who are facing the loss of loved ones. Equally important, our colleagues, co-workers, and friends out there in the country and in the world who are at the forefront of taking on the challenge of trying to address this global challenge in the form of COVID-19. I am, my first home is Tonga. I am a proud grandfather of 4. My second home is New Zealand. But as I've been saying to some of my colleagues over the last few decades, I consider myself as a global citizen because of the work that I do, my belief and my experience learning and travel and study. And I think COVID-19 has made it very clearly to us in our own space at home that indeed we are in a global village, and we should consider ourselves, in addition to being national citizens, as you know, the members of one common home, planet Earth. With those words, I'd like to pass over to Viliami to express his greetings before we continue. Viliami, over to you.
Thank you, Sione, and welcome to all of you who are listening in from your home, and thank you for allowing us to come into your living room today and to join in this very important discussion. As Sione has mentioned, we are in a time of isolating ourselves, but fortunately, we have this technology so we can still be connecting with each other and share our thoughts as it's been expressed by in the media. Like Sione, I hail from the island kingdom of Tonga, and I'm a medical person in training, a medical doctor, physician, public health, and been working with Pacific people. And I've been here in New Zealand for about 6 years now, and working with Health Promotion Forum, looking after the Pacific portfolio. I'm very excited to be part of this talanoa, this conversation, and I welcome everyone. Malo pito.
And thank you, Viliami. I've just put up my PowerPoint presentation on our board just to make sure, and I'm checking it from back to front, just to make sure that everything is working well. As you can see from the first slide there, I am the Executive Director of the Health Promotion Forum. We are fortunate to have Viliami as our Senior Pacific Health Promotion Strategist, and Viliami is also a Research Fellow at Otago University. The notion of the theme of this conversation of before Te Tiriti, there was Moana, was really to emphasize 2 things. One is that there are Pacific perspectives on Te Tiriti, and 1 or 2 of those perspectives you'll hear from me and Viliami today. But equally important also the relationship, the relational space in the big Moana Nui Akiwa between Tangata Whenua and Tangata Moana has always been there, you know, many eons ago. And it's a relationship that is, as suggested by the topic, is beyond and before Te Tiriti. And it's time to share those perspectives as a way of supporting the importance and the significance of Te Tiriti, not just a historical statement and document. More importantly, as a framework, as a tool that will link us to the past, to the present, and to the future of our journey as a nation and part of the world community. This is an important slide because it's the summary of the presentation. And if you forget everything else, but remember only this slide, I'll be happy, and I'm sure Viliami will be happy about that. And so the thesis or the argument of my presentation is really to say Moana people, Pacific peoples, have no choice, but actually to support and advocate Te Tiriti or Waitangi. Not the treaty, not the English version, but the indigenous language version. That's the one I'm talking about. I just want to make that it's clear. And we should support that for these 5 major reasons. One is the well-being of our whanaunga, tangata whenua. The second reason is the rights and well-being also of Moana Nui Kiwa people, we from the Pacific, and also other indigenous peoples around the world. Depending on who is counting, there are some 300 to 400 million indigenous peoples around the world, from Europe to Asia, South America, in the Pacific, of course, and parts of Africa. In fact, most parts of the world. The third reason why we should support Te Tiriti is the well-being and right of all peoples in our nation. The fourth reason is the well-being and rights of our fellow human beings around the world. At the end of the day, Te Tiriti o Waitangi can be seen as a subset of the 1948 United Nations Declarations of Human Rights. It's a human rights issue. Te Tiriti is a human rights statement. The fifth reason is that, equally important, the role of Te Tiriti in sustaining and promoting indigenous knowledge systems. And I'll speak about those 5 in a bit more details as we progress the next 25 minutes or so. But basically what I'm saying is that our individual and collective well-being are inextricably one, entwined and interdependent. The world is one country. The earth is one country and mankind, its citizens. So let's start on the well-being and rights of Maori, why we should advocate and promote Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Briefly on our history, you'll know that it's about 2 equal partners, their rights and responsibilities. In the last almost 200 years, the Crown did not honor its part until recently. As a consequence, the whole nation suffered, and in particular Maori, the loss of land, diseases, deprivation, poverty, knowledge loss, including language and all of that until recently, huge devastation. But the whole nation, suffers because of that. As mentioned already, the Crown recently tried to honor its part on Te Tiriti, reparations, settlement, is recovery, but we still have a few more streets to walk, a few more miles to walk. Moana people should support what is right, as a matter of principle. The second reason is about the rights and well-being of Moana people and other indigenous peoples. Justice for one is justice for all. Justice for Maori is also justice for Moana people. We have a relationship, as mentioned earlier, with tangata whenua, which is beyond Te Tiriti, before Te Tiriti or Waitangi. And speaking from personal and professional experience, I have benefited greatly and it's clear also at the institutional level, the close collaboration between Tangata Whenua and Pacific peoples, and the positive outcomes that have come out of that. You witnessed that through the education sector, the health sector, policy level, even at the community level. Pacifica peoples has also learned over the last 200 years our own experience with, the sweeping power, devastating of imperialism and colonization that are based on doctrines of racism and the classification and the hierarchy of the order of things, the hierarchy of humanity. And as you know, those of certain colors are at the lower ranks of that pyramid. Goes without saying that Aotearoa New Zealand is a Moana nation, hence the support that we need as Pacific peoples to support Te Tiriti. The United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, 2007, stipulates very clearly the need for justice, the needs for the rights of indigenous peoples across the world to be not only acknowledged, but advocated for their well-being in every sense, every meaning of that word. And so if Pacifica peoples support Te Tiriti, that's an example of how the rights and the well-being of indigenous peoples can be supported around the world. So you can see from the diagram there is the relationship under Te Tiriti, Tangata Whenua and Tau Iwi, but we also have that relationship of Moana people with Tangata Whenua. The third reason is the well-being and the rights of all peoples in our nation. Again, just to refresh our memory, the story of our nation over the last 200 years was one of injustice and resulting poverty, deprivation, and inequity. What is often lost in the narrative and the discourse is the story of constructive resilience of indigenous peoples. Those of you who are familiar with our history, despite the domination, indigenous peoples, Tangata Whenua, responded with peace and positive forces. One can recall the 1881 Parihaka situation. We can think of Whina Cooper's Walk, 1975. We can think of Ngati Whātua, Okahu Bay, Western Point. In fact, we can think of many examples from our history of yesterday and even stories that are unfolding today. Pacific peoples came to New Zealand some 50 years ago, half a century ago, because the economy was booming and there was work to be done at a certain level. So Pacific peoples came and swept the floors of factories, cleaned the street and all of that. And we experience institutions that are inherent with domination and racism. And we learn a lot from that. We also learn from our own situation in the Pacific over the last 200 years. Domination is not right in any form, in any situation, under any circumstances. Te Tiriti Waitangi is an agreement to address what was wrong. And looking into our future, our nation is becoming very diverse, in fact, super diverse. And so Te Tiriti Waitangi offers a template for the future that we live in harmony as equal fellow human beings, that we live in unity and diversity. So it's a constitutional framework to build our nation, to become more just, equitable, peaceful, and prosperous. It is also a learning template for other indigenous peoples around the world. So at the end of the day, it's about our rights as human beings and the well-being of our human family. As I mentioned earlier, the United Nations 1948 Declaration, and underneath that, as subsets, we have the rights of women, the rights of children. And if we are to address the well-being and the rights of these various groups, from indigeneity to religious groups, ethnicity, and all of that, Te Tiriti offers a case to study and to look closely at how to do that. At the end of the day, the right of one is the right of all, and the oppressing of the right of one is the oppressing of the right of all. Last year, that's the document that I have in part, the right-hand side of the slide. We hosted a world conference in health promotion in Rotorua in partnership with the International Union for Health Promotion and Education, IUHPE. One of the legacy initiatives from that conference are two statements. One statement is about planetary health, and the other one is about the rights of indigenous peoples and indigenous knowledge and indigenous health promotion. I recommend that you have a close look at these two documents, because they take the local and the national with indigenous experience up to the global level. The voice of indigenous peoples should be heard at the global level. And the effort that friends and colleagues, some of you are participating in this webinar today, we work hard together to make sure that these statements declare the rights and the need to address the well-being of the earth and the well-being of indigenous peoples. More importantly, that these two statements can be used to inform policies at local, national, and international level. I mentioned earlier the significance of the contribution of Te Tiriti to the maintenance of indigenous knowledge. As you know, in Article 2 of Te Tiriti, it refers to the taonga of tangata whenua. And one of the important taonga of tangata whenua, the treasures of Maori, is their language and their knowledge. And Te Tiriti provides a tool, a framework with which we can preserve not just Te Reo Maori here in Aotearoa, but the Pacific languages are riding on that. And as you know, language is the basket of knowledge. And if we lose our language, we lose our knowledge. And if we lose our knowledge, we don't know who we are. We don't know our identity. We forget the past, we are confused the present, and we don't know where to go to in the future. And there are lots of wisdom and knowledge in our language, in our indigenous knowledge, that can actually contribute as solutions to some of the global challenges that we are facing today. You know, for example, our approach to leadership, it's collective. Our worldview of nature, of the environment. As they say, we are the whanua, and the whanua is us. We are the land, and the land is us. We see ourselves as part and parcel of the environment, and we do not sit outside that. Some of the challenges that we are facing today, as you know, it's because of this thinking of we are above, we are outside from our environment, and therefore we can exploit and control and dominate the environment as part of our effort to fight and compete and dominate each other in our rat race towards material wealth and natural resources on this one home that we have, planet Earth. So there's a lot to be learned from our indigenous knowledge systems. As the diagram tries to depict, Western knowledge is dominant in the world right now. Indigenous knowledge has a huge contribution to make to the collective well-being of humanity. And so is the knowledge of the East. There's also the role of spiritual knowledge systems, whether it's based on culture, whether it's based on faith, based on revealed religion. In our social evolution as humanity, we have come to a point of being a global village. And it's time, rather than competing with dominating the knowledge space, it's time for these knowledge systems to make their rightful contributions and find their rightful spaces in our collective effort of contributing to the well-being and the knowledge of humanity. And indigenous knowledge, tangata whenua knowledge, other forms of Pacific knowledges can make huge contributions to our well-being as the human family. Our case here in New Zealand is actually a replica of what is happening around the world. And I'm arguing that all the human constructs, the social constructs that are obsolete and not working, there is justification to correct them, if not replace that. The modes of thoughts that are prevailing, that are based on self-interest, based on discrimination, based on partisan well-being rather than collective well-being. We need to rethink, revisit, and revise such understanding and approaches to life. Our challenges at a global level today, whether it's man-made, social, or environmental, because of those outdated mode of thinking, institutional practices, and so on. And indigenous knowledge can actually contribute to the moral dimension of thinking, of the use of power, and the distribution and utilization of resources. And it's about time that we realize that our new reality is that we are a global village, and the discourse would need to lift to a higher level that is not based on partisan concerns and self-interest, but to try to achieve unity of thought and unity of action. And we are beginning to see glimpses of that in our effort to fight COVID-19. One powerful, effective tool in this process is justice. Some of you have seen, if not most of you have seen this diagram from Kate Raworth, an economist from Oxford University. And this is the kind of thinking that I referred to earlier. Thinking that is rising above the limitations of our national trappings and realize that it's about a one world, one people with all its diversity, and one health and well-being. And economy, we should practice our economy within the safe space of sustainability, as you can see from the diagram there from the work of Kate Raworth. And things like biodiversity to the left hand side, the bottom side of the diagram, through which challenges like viruses can come through into our space as human beings. can be addressed if we are able to try to meet only our need and not our greed. You know, as Gandhi said, there's enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. So what can we do as Moana people? We can learn from our own indigenous knowledge systems that are holistic, comprehensive, time-tested, and it's about a balanced approach to well-being and health, from the local to the level of planetary health. This is a model that some of our Pacific colleagues are familiar with, the Whenua model that I introduced to the health sector, the education sector in the, over 10 years ago, and Viliami and I and others revamped it to suit our new reality. At the end of the day, it's about whenua, it's about the healthy environment with healthy people. We can also adapt the Aotearoa Charter and use its three major strategies of advocacy, enabling, and mediation to ensure that, that the rights of tangata whenua, the rights of Moana Nui Kiwa, the rights of all peoples on this nation, as we become more diverse than before, that our rights and our well-being are addressed. We can create supportive environments, community action and development, develop personal skills. And this is the big one for me, not only to reorient the health services, but also to reorient all societal systems to move away from one of discrimination and partisan well-being to one that is moving towards equity and fair distribution of power and resources. Just in case that we have participants who are not familiar with this major tool for health promotion, this is the Aotearoa Charter, World Health Organization effort, 1986 in Ottawa, Canada. Colleagues from around the world gathered together and realizing the need to look across the world and address our common challenges, in particular our health and well-being. And they produced the Aotearoa Charter, which is one of the two tools that inform health promotion. That's my one of my professions, along with Viliami. Those two documents, two tools that inform health promotion in Aotearoa New Zealand is the Aotearoa Charter and Te Tiriti or Waitangi. This is a photo of Sameson Duri, the opening plenary speaker at the World Conference on Health Promotion that I referred to last April, almost a year ago. At the time, we faced a national challenge of the March 15 incident, loss of 50 plus lives in the South Island. Who would have thought that a year later, the country again face even more challenging situations, than last year. At that conference, Sameson, as he always does, offered another health promotion tool to the nation and the world of Indigenous peoples. Matariki, in addition to Te Pai Mahatonga. I bring that up as an example of the richness of the repository of our Indigenous knowledge systems that we can go to as one of the sources of tools, frameworks, and strategies, and thinking and wisdom to address human rights, but also any challenges that we face in the world today. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll wrap up In summary, we have come a long way in our social evolution as humanity. We have now realized that the earth is but one country. Mankind is citizens. We have come from the tribal and family era to the empire, to the nation era. We are now at the planetary stage, but quite a few of us are still thinking at the empire level. The center of sovereignty is still at the national level, where while the challenges that we are facing are actually planetary and global in many aspects. And so the thinking needs to lift, our set of values need to lift, and therefore the systems and the institutions that we build should reflect that planetary thinking, that global set of values, and our relationship to each other will then become, we are citizens of one global village, and we should learn how to live in peace, harmony, and prosperity, rather than continue to fight on our collective human and natural resources on our one common home, planet Earth. And instead of living as if we have 5 planets, when actually we just have one. We haven't found a way of going to other planets in our solar system. So we might as well look after ourselves, be kind to each other, and try to work collectively to build our nation, and equally important, to contribute to the well-being of our global community. And if we do that well, I'm sure I can still go back to Tonga with my moko, as you can see in this picture, and swim in the blue, clean, clear, non-polluting Tongan waters, part of the Moana Ocean. And on a serious note, our grandchildren and their grandchildren will live in a united, loving, peaceful, prosperous global community in years to come. Some resources there, references for you to look up. It's been an honor to be part of this webinar. And I'm sure Viliami has synthesized and crystallized all those points that I was rambling about, and he's going to share his wisdom in the next few minutes. So thank you, Malo Obito. Over to you, Viliami.
Thank you, Sione. And can you go back to your previous slides? Can you just go to this? Yes, okay. Once again, I'm very thankful and grateful and honored to be part of this corridor. Viliami Puloka is my name, if some of you have just joined us, and I'm working with Sione in the Health Promotion Forum of New Zealand. There are just a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you at the moment, and then maybe some others I can make comments when we have the discussion, answer the questions from our viewers. I thought this is a very great slides here. The fact that we have moved on from being in the tribal family to the empire nations, and then now we are in the planetary situation in the global, right? But I thought also it's important to realize that actually when we move along, it's not a linear kind of movement, it's cyclic actually, and we do not leave behind the values that we have as a tribal family. I think this is very important. Our value is non-negotiable. The value that we have in the Pacific, which is very similar to what in the Maori, our communal way of thinking, spirituality, the interconnectedness, the interdependence, those are values that moves with us, even when we go to the empire nation state, and even when we move on to the planetary thinking, and we understand that we are in the one world, we're one people. But unless we maintain the values that we have and do not negotiate those values, yes, we adopt and adapt to the situation, to the time and to the environment. But we cannot, because once we dilute our values, then we lost our identity. And that's, I think, part of the issue that we are dealing with. The other point that I just want to talk about at this point is that the fact that I just mentioned two experiences that I have as a Pacific Islander coming here to New Zealand. As I mentioned earlier, I came here and joined the Health Promotion Forum in later part of 2014. So it's about 6 years now. Before that, I never really know anything about New Zealand. I never go to school here. I just travel through here. And when I came here and I realized felt very emotional when I hear that the people who actually, the first people of this country, the Maori, seems to be sidelined. You know, they seems to be asking for their identity, for their sovereignty, for everything. And I thought, what is happening here? And I look back and where I come from and my experience in the Pacific, actually, it's the same thing that happens in many of the Pacific Islands. You know, colonization have the same pattern, and it's pretty much was done by the same people. The only difference, though, I think, is that we were very, very fortunate in our part of the world where we remain, we own our country, our land, we own our, we still have sovereignty, and no one else is running our country. And many of our country, there's a lot to be decided of the way we are running our country, but at least we are running our countries and things like that. But I'm referring to the fact that I felt very emotional when I came here, because I related to the Maori people as whānau. There's all this legal status that we had to be able to allow to come here. And several times I came through here. One time I came through here and I went to Manila to a meeting, and I came back here, and my passport, my visa was expired and need to be transferred to another new passport. I didn't have time to do that. But when I came here, I was taken to the side by, several times in that course of my journey, I was really being felt that I'm not welcome in this country. And actually, I came to a point that I asked a lady who was non-Pacific, was interviewing, and I said, where you come from? I am a Pacific person. This is a Pacific country, and I'm getting very irritated that you are giving me. But I have that kind of emotional feeling when I came to Aotearoa, and I felt that I'm part of the Moana, and Aotearoa is Moana, as Sione was referring to. And yet I felt that I was excluded. I was not welcome to come to this country. And the last bit of point that I want to make here, I was just being reminded this week that there are Pacific people now who came here for picking the fruits, the seasonal workers. And actually, they have been isolated out there in the bush to make sure that we enjoy the fruits that come into the supermarkets, especially at this time. And I had a radio program yesterday in Tongans, and I asked the Tongans, every time you wash your hands, remember the hands that are actually continuing in the hospital, in the supermarket, and those Pacific people who are picking fruit and isolated in the bush so that we can enjoy the life that we are enjoying now. So anyway, those kind of feeling that I feel that very much that we in the Pacific, as Sione was referring to, we very much feel that we are part of Aotearoa. We are part of the Maori people. We are one people coming from Moana, and maybe we are the later waka, which has finally arrived here. But that's just what I wanted to make a comment in now, and then maybe we can continue discussing. Malo.
Thank you. There's another story that the Tongans went off track in the long voyage, and they ended up in Tonga. But that's a story for another webinar, another session. Valance, thank you very much for your patience. I'll hand it over to you to facilitate the rest of our sessions. I understand that there might be some questions, some comments, and over to you, Valance.
Tēnā koe, Sione, tēnā koe, Viliami. He nui ngā part-time. There are quite a few part-time. Am I coming up there, Dan, on the other side there? Let's just presume I am. Okay, as long as you guys can hear me. So there are actually a lot of questions, and I am mindful that at best we have 10 minutes to answer all these questions. So all things equal, I'm just going to run through the questions as we've received them. That's okay with everybody. The first question, just segueing into the first question, in 1984, Sydney Melbourne composed a song, Ngā Iwi E. And Ngā Iwi E is a call for action for the unity of the peoples of the Pacific. And in the song it says, Kia kotahi rā te moana nui a kiwa. So in terms of te moana nui a kiwa and the use of the word moana, Rachel Liafe asks, or leaves, and also apologies if I pronounce your name wrong. Could you give more perspective around your use of moana as opposed to Pacific or Pacifica?
Moana is a Proto-Polynesian concept and word. You find it across most of the Polynesian languages. Of course, the Pacific languages are all, including Maori for that matter, are dialects of that one mother tongue, Proto-Polynesian. That's the name that linguists, gave to that first language that branched off from the Indo-Malayo language. I'm answering this from off the top of my head. And so Moana is the common term that reflects not just the physical vastness and depth and richness of the biggest ocean in the world, but on a deeper conceptual level, it refers to the richness of life, to the richness and diversity of our knowledge and our experience, and how we live our life as a relationship between the environment and us. Tongan academic Eperi Hauofa referred to how we were classified, named more recently as islands in the sea or far isles in the ocean. Rather, he said that we should look at ourselves as the sea of islands. In other words, the sea is part of our aqua continent, Moana. So to sum up that answer, it's a indigenous concept, Moana. It has a layer of many meanings that we can have a dialogue on later on. Compared to Pacifica, that's an effort to create a composite term that embraces the diversity of us from different parts of the Pacific coming together in New Zealand. But it's also an effort to reword the word Pacific into a form that is palatable and acceptable compared to Pacific Islanders and all of that. Terms used on us as convenience to define us, in one sweeping blanket approach, which lacks the acknowledgement of the richness of our diversity from Samoa, Cook Islands, Tonga, Niue, Tualu, and all of that. I hope I answered that.
Ka pai e tautoko au, I support that kōrero. Viliami, he kōrero au?
I think Sione covers all that, and I think it's very true. It's just a common term that we use, and it's very much like that we are the ocean. The ocean is us and the ocean, and everything. Because being an island, there's more ocean than land, and that's our resource and everything. Yeah.
Ka pai. And I think that also speaks meaningfully to the kōrero, to the relationship between whenua, whanua, whenua, and that relationship between, you know, ourselves, the placenta,
Exactly.
and our connection to not only the land, but our wider natural environment, which includes the moana. A second question from Aidan McLeod. As we know, there are actually 4 articles to the treaty, and the 4th talks about our rights to have access and to practice our own spirituality and religion. So Aidan asks, what role do you see for religion and spirituality in supporting justice for Indigenous peoples?
The spiritual dimension of life, the spiritual dimension of well-being, not only have a significant role to play in our daily lives, but it actually is central. Without spirituality as a dimension, the other dimension, of course, is the material, physical dimension of life. Indigenous worldviews, Indigenous way of understanding the world and life will be significantly deprived. You know, in other words, the Indigenous worldview is the spiritual realm is one and an important part of our existence. You know, there is the physical and there's also the spiritual. And it's very clear when we look back at our traditions, our knowledge handed down from our ancestors, that it is the spiritual world to which we look for guidance, for wisdom, for principles and values how to live our life, not only in times of peace and prosperity, but also in times of adversity like this. This is when we dig deep into our spirit and we call the whakatauki, you know, the words of the ancestors that tells us how to live in a life of reciprocity, how to love, how to share, how to be kind to one another, and how to be kind to nature. I did touch earlier on the how we perceive the whole creation, the whole environment, and humanity is part and parcel of that rather than us outside. The notion of whanua, that's an indication of the richness of the spiritual dimension of life for Indigenous knowledge. And in many ways, the knowledge, the wisdom of Indigenous knowledge are akin, similar to some of the knowledge and wisdom that you find in religious traditions like Buddhism, Christianity, the Baha'i faith, Islam. When you look closely in those deep repository of knowledge and wisdom and spiritual teachings, you find there are words of wisdom there, how to live in peace with one another and how to live in peace with the rest of the creation. Yeah, so that's my answer for that one, the role of spirituality in Indigenous life and perspectives.
Ka pai. I might, given that we've only got a few minutes left, I might throw the maybe the second to last question to you, Viliami, to start us off with. And it's a combination of a few questions here. One from Te Wharekura, Te Kura Kaupapa Maori o Taki Timu, but also related to Julie's question as well. So basically, how do we change a person's mindset from one's own self-interest and getting them to see the bigger picture, as in a shift from individualism to a shift to collectivism?
Wow, that's a biggie. Yeah, I think in my own experience, this is some of the things. It's almost like the culture. It's not taught, but it's something that you have to caught. So we need people who actually live out that way of life that we want people to aspire to. We have to have people to have the experience, more of experiential learning rather than a head, mind understanding from reading or teaching something. So I think unless and until people going through life experience and they experience that, it will be easier for them then to make a decision to change their way of doing things, because you know, it's common humanity, us as human people, that when we have an experience that we learn from that, it will be much easier for us to put that into action rather than something that we hear about or read about or just mentally, academically as thinking about it. So that's how I would think, that's how we would be able to do it.
If I may add to that, Valance, that's the role of education. And if we see education as a lifelong process, we talk about instilling values into human beings, knowledge and values. And that's where the first school, the home and family comes in. The earlier the learning process in terms of not only knowledge, but also values and principles and wisdom, the higher the likelihood that we learn values that are suitable for the reality of life today. You know, that last slide that I showed, our journey, our social evolution from the tribal family to the global level. And Viliami is right that we do not compromise and change our principles. What is required is to broaden our principles, to elevate their relevance and their applicability, if there's such a word, into our new reality. And so it's the educational process, starts from the home. It would be accurate to say that when the child is born, you know, the child is a clean slate, template. And it's what we teach them. If we teach them love, they will love in return. If we teach them prejudice, they will reflect it. Equally important is for public institutions not to continue to reinforce principles that will cause disunity among us. And we learn from the COVID-19 situation that it's not about competition. It's about collaboration. It's not about discrimination. It's about sharing, loving compassion, and caring for one another. And our leader is calling for be strong, be kind, be united. Those are the principles that will help us. So at the family level and the public institutional level, education system in particular, but not just the education sector, we need to learn new knowledge, new value systems that will help us. And I mentioned earlier that we can actually go into our Indigenous knowledge systems and bring out those such principles that can help in our journey and how we live our new global village that we are in. And that will help to change the mindset, not only of the individual, you know, but the psyche of public institutions.
Tēnā koe, Sione. He rawe e rā whakaaro o kōrua. I think those last two comments really resonate with a lot of our members, a lot of our audience. There are a few more questions and they all essentially revolve around what is the role of our education system within our secondary schools, within our universities, in terms of how do we find that, I suppose, equity for our Maori and Pacifica students. I think, you know, values is the most important part. It's with the heart before you engage with the head. As we know, last year in the announcement was made that Te Tiriti o Waitangi and New Zealand history would be taught in our secondary school systems, in our curriculum. But I think to go a step further than that, what are the values? You know, just drawing on your, on both the title, Before Te Tiriti. Before Te Tiriti, there were our values. And so we saw Te Tiriti through our values, through tika, pono, aroha, through kotahitanga, whanaumatanga, and so on. And those are the things that really engage the hearts. Those are the values that really shape our behavior. So I would like to think that with those questions, with the questions that have been asked about the education system and so on, that in the last koro that you've given, I would hope and I would think that that has answered a lot of those questions. Koe no rai te iwi kua rua miniti pāhi te rua karaka, kua hifa te wā kia tātou. Time is up, and I think because there's a lot of wonderful discussion, I think that is a testament to the wonderful kōrero that was delivered by yourself, matua Sione, kōrero tahi ki a koe, matua Viliami. Nō reira, on behalf of all of our audience, I'd like to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with our audience. Also, I'd like to acknowledge our audience. Mei kore koutou. Without you, we wouldn't have this robust discussion. And so you are very much a part of this wānanga, this robust discussion. So to everybody around the motu of Aotearoa and around the motu, tēnā koutou katoa. Do you guys want to say goodbye to you? Just a last mihi to everybody.
I just want to say thank you, Valance. I think you make a lot of difference by the way you calmly pilot our ship today. And I think our canoe arrives where we have because of your captaincy. Thank you.
Yes, from me to Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your facilitation, but also to our audience out there, wherever you are, stay safe, be happy, be strong, and be kind and united against COVID-19. Thank you for your participation. Thank you. Have a safe, happy day.
Tēnā kōrero. And just before I close with the karakia, I'd also like to say the whakatauki ki te pai, a muri ka pai a mua. If everything in the back is going good, then everything in the front is going well too. So I'd like to also thank Jenny Renkine for providing our questions, moderating our questions, and also to Dan Mills for providing all the IT support in the background. Koe no rā tātou, hei whakatepe māku i tēnei huhunga o tātou. I'm just going to close with the karakia. Nō reira kia inoi tātou. E te ariki e te atua ka harawa ko te ihi te wehi te tapu ko te mātāpū no o ngā mea tapu katoa. Nei rā mātou e koropiko nei hei whakamoemi te hei whakawhetai ki a koe mauna kere te katoa ko tākua hache koe ki a mātou. Me mātou e noho pauria nei tēnei wā, ara me tēnei o ngā māuiwi, tēnei o ngā uru tāka pāngia, te tini me te mano, e pūkohu ana te haere ki ngā hapori putano i te ao. Nō reira homai anō tō ringa ta whai, tō ringa kaha, te aroha, kia piki te kaha, kia piki te ora te māramatanga ki wanganui a mātou. Manaki tia mai hoki o mātou whānau e rā e mauiwi ana. E rawa kore ana, e pani ana uhia mai te tōmairangi e ta whai. Kai runga ki tēnā ki tēnā mātou, hei āwhina, hei tohu i a mātou. Tūturu, whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e, kui e, tāiki e. Tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Malo o whātu.